welcome back to another episode of the Open Source Cafe. And this is by far the most exciting one because first we have a really amazing guest with us, and we're going to be answering one of the most asked questions in our communities, which is, can students get into DevOps? Is DevOps the good career choice for new grads and freshers? But before we get started with the discussion, huge shout out to Nana for joining. Nana, I'm sure you know Nana if you're working in the field of DevOps, you're learning DevOps. Nana has a great YouTube channel. I'll leave the links in the description below. But Nana, would you like to tell our viewers a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me first of all. So I am actually a DevOps engineer with a background of software engineering. So I started actually as a software developer, and then slowly I noticed that the DevOps tasks were like more interesting for me than just sitting and programming or coding, which is probably the opposite of what most of the developers or software developers would say. And then I kind of transitioned into, building the CI/CD stuff, and then Kubernetes came into my life, and that became actually my main focus for like 1.5 years. So I was doing full-time Kubernetes, and then I just wanted to take my painful experiences with Kubernetes and just put them into videos to help other people go through the same process that I went through, but without the frustration of not having the resources online of that. So that's how the YouTube channel Tech with Nana came to be, and that's what I'm doing now full time, just creating content, consulting companies into DevOps. So that kind of goes hand in hand, getting the experience and then putting them into videos and then kind of spreading that knowledge.
Amazing. And I consume a lot of content. I recently graduated like last week or something, and I'm also new in this field, so I obviously watch a lot of tutorials on YouTube's around DevOps and engage in the community. And for everyone listening, I just want to say I think like TechWinana is the best in terms of like explanations. When you talk about, I saw your Prometheus videos was just, I have not found like that level of details even in Kubernetes and DevOps. So anytime someone asks me how do you get started with DevOps, what channels you recommend, just go check out Tech with Nana. I believe you have your own boot camps as well. All the links I leave in the description below, and I'm sure you will not regret it. Cool. So a lot of new grads are joining, and potentially people who want to transition into DevOps. Like you said, you worked in the field of software first. So on my channel, we've already like covered about what is DevOps and tech stuff and all these other things. But for someone who may be new to it, who might be looking for like a career change, who may not have much experience with DevOps, can you maybe explain to them in like layman terms what exactly is DevOps and why is it so popular these days?
Yeah, so DevOps is basically, so you have to imagine, I mean, obviously you have the developer and operations. I don't think that DevOps, the name itself, really actually describes the job, because it's not just development operations, it's actually everything that you can imagine that goes into the software development and then software release process. Like if you imagine that whole process, and there are like steps and stages during that life cycle, and DevOps is about automating the whole process end to end. And that's why I said, because development and operations just two different roles in that life cycle, right? But you have the testers, you have the product manager, you have the security people. So all of that is also part of DevOps. And why it's becoming popular is because the things that DevOps automates, these things have been around all the time, right? You have this life cycle, you have to develop the stuff, you have to test the stuff, check for security, you have to release that. So these processes have been there all the time, like since we have been creating software. But DevOps is basically taking those processes that people have been doing manually, mostly manually and inefficiently during these times, and basically making them more efficient, making them automated. And the automated part itself is the main focus of DevOps, right? Because it's about making the processes efficient, and by automating, basically you save time, because manual versus automated, less effort, you make less mistakes. Again, you automate, systemize stuff, so you don't have to go through the manual effort and have the human errors basically on the way, and just making the process faster, right? Because you have like this streamlined pipeline of planning, feature, bug fix, whatever it is, and streamlining all the way to the end production. So that's the DevOps.
Thanks for sharing, Nana. And obviously, if you want to learn more about, you have Nana's channel, you have my channel. I did a stream with Rocco from Pulumi recently about the evolution of DevOps. You can check it out. But today we're talking about career. So, why is it so popular with with individuals to take it as a career path? And why did you decide to like transition from a software role?
I think okay, so this is my personal take on difference between the software development and the DevOps or even operations. So I think DevOps, when you're a DevOps engineer, you have a different like not only in terms of skills and knowledge, but in terms of the type of person you are. I think it's a little bit different because as a developer, you have knowledge in a set of specific technologies and maybe programming language, libraries, whatever, and you kind of code. So it's more detail oriented work and tasks. And DevOps is it's more high level, right? So you have to have in mind like 20 different technologies, and you have to be able to evaluate different options, and you basically are architecting different processes, right? You are thinking, okay, how do I take these and combine with these and then put all these pieces together so that I have at the end I have this nice process, right? And of course you are continuously updating and improving it. So I think DevOps is more like an architect role and not really the one that is like going into details and implementing. So you have to that's the main challenge actually, because you have to know much more as a DevOps engineer, because you have to be able to evaluate tools, right? Because and within each category, like CI/CD tool, right, the deployment tool, automation tools, because if you just know one tool, you're kind of biased, right? You have to be able to compare it with similar other tools. So at the end, you basically end up with like 20 technologies that you have to know about, and you have to kind of put them together like Lego pieces to design like the most optimal workflows for your team. So I think that's the difference between being like a hands-on operations developer, whatever that role is, and then being a DevOps engineer who kind of tries to bring everyone together and then try to design this optimal process for the whole team.
So learning is inevitable because so many tools keep coming out, and we talk about the CNCF landscape in itself. Navigating that can be quite a challenge for some people. So, how do you keep up with all these things? And you mentioned you do consulting as well, and for a particular problem, there exists various solutions. So, how do you decide which particular tool to go with?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I actually made a dedicated YouTube video for that because I thought it would be interesting for people. Because I would see in the comments, like I would do cover like another tool like every 2 weeks or so, and people were like, how do you know so many technologies? And I actually made like a full video on how do I approach this stuff. And I think the most important stuff when you have to keep up with the technologies and learn so many things is to differentiate, to basically just go and split. Am I learning a concept? Am I learning a specific tool? Because tools, they come and go, right? They change. I'm pretty sure that a lot of tools that I've covered on my YouTube channel, they probably will not exist in like 3-4 years, right? Because either one tool basically comes to the market and they become the dominant one and everybody's using it, or I don't know, they just change the direction or do whatever, something else, whatever, for many reasons. So tools really come and go. So you shouldn't attach yourself to the tools, and you have to think about it this way: a technology, a tool solves a set of problems, right? In the software development, DevOps process, whatever that is. So you have to start with understanding the problem first, and when you understand the problem, then you kind of zoom out and you start thinking, okay, how do these different alternative tools solve this problem? Because each one has its own features, the different approach, whatever. So you have like better way to analyze and compare these tools with each other, because now you're not learning the tool, you're learning what is the solution to this problem, or what is the problem in the first place. So I think that's the approach you should take with everything that you learn, right? So when people introduce new tools to me, or when I kind of discover, okay, this tool is becoming like really popular, my first question is not, oh, why is this tool so cool, or what cool features does it have? My first question is, what problem does it solve? Why was it created? Like, who came up with the idea and thought, okay, we need this kind of tool to exist in the DevOps space, right? So you should always start with this question, understand the issue, the problem, and then learning the tool becomes way easier.
Amazing, and I could not agree more on that point. So your project has some requirements, and accordingly you find the tools rather than vice versa. Cool, cool. All right, and now let's talk a little bit more about the career path, since most folks are watching it. For that, so I started working, like not working, but like contributing, like to Kubernetes and stuff at the end of my freshman year. Changed my life, and I'm really happy with my decisions. So I kind of like share about it. Like you can try out various things like web dev and machine learning, DevOps, or whatever, and then you can go into the fields that you like. But since we're talking about DevOps, can you share a little bit more about from a new grad, of like for a new grad? Um, is it like the right choice? I don't see if that's a good question or not, but something maybe like what are the prerequisites and what should they consider in mind when they're looking for the first role?
Yeah, so a lot of people ask us the same question actually. So, for example, they have either very little IT background or they just graduated. So the first question is, can I start with DevOps or do I have to do something else? So my question to that is, yes, you have to have some kind of prerequisite knowledge. Now, this prerequisite knowledge doesn't have to be really, really big. Like you don't have to have, of course it's preferable, but you don't have to have like a work experience as a software developer or IT operations or cloud engineer for like years before you start DevOps. What you have, and again, approaching it and asking it a little bit differently. As I mentioned, DevOps is basically automating the manual processes that have basically existed in this life cycle of creating software, releasing the software. So when you learn DevOps, you have to understand what are you even automating, right? Why are you using these tools and what are these processes? So if you don't understand what CI/CD pipeline or the process is it's really hard to grasp like the DevOps technologies and the whole thing around it, right? So you have to you basically have to understand like how developers work, what are key workflows, what is a release, right? What happens during the release phase, like on an abstract level, and then you can actually get started with this knowledge with DevOps. Of course, depends, right? For example, our bootcamp, we designed it in a way that you don't need any DevOps pre-knowledge. So it starts from zero, like every technology that we teach, Docker, Kubernetes, whatever, we start from zero. So we explain why do you need Docker, why do you need Kubernetes, like that level. But for DevOps, you need to understand a little bit of why is it even necessary? Like, what are we automating in the first place? And I think you can learn that stuff actually on YouTube, on various courses. Like you can actually, which is crazy, right? You can actually go and start with zero or IT background and knowledge, and you can build the whole skill all the way to the DevOps completely online, right? You can use just YouTube, you can use courses, right? Depending like how much time and self-discipline you have, you can do everything completely for free. If you need a little bit of guidance and if you are kind of in time stress, you can go and find courses. But you can do that pretty much with online resources and not need like an official educational path for that.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it also answers another question that we get quite a lot. I get this question that should I go with the development or should I go with DevOps? So if you want to go in DevOps, definitely do both, right? You should know how software development works a little bit, and then you can get started with it. I always preach about learn on the go, like when you're like contributing to open source or whatever, because uh, it's like it's huge and tools keep coming regularly, and I keep learning, like we keep learning regularly, so you have to learning is inevitable basically. Cool, cool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so the next question we have over here is where do we find DevOps roles?
Yeah, that's also an interesting question. Of course, depends probably in where you live, and I mean there are probably areas where DevOps is more demanded and they're looking for more engineers. But generally, I think the online platforms we just search for. There are also a lot of online platforms that are specialized either on IT jobs or DevOps jobs. I think LinkedIn is a really good source of finding. So you can actually switch that, right? Instead of going and trying to find the jobs, you can let people know, hey, I'm looking for a job, right? So I think LinkedIn has various features, so you can just be active on LinkedIn and basically I don't know, share your knowledge, kind of express what your background is, what you're learning, kind of document that journey so that you show to the HR, the headhunters, that you are open for this kind of position. And I think one more thing that I can kind of advise people who are, especially when they're starting off as a junior DevOps engineer and looking for this kind of role, it's a little bit more difficult than when you have experience. I think what's gonna really help is you have to, just like the companies have a criteria and like a job description, you have to decide for yourself what kind of job you're looking, right? Because if you just go out blindly, just trying to search anything and agree to anything, it will be more difficult for you to find a proper job, right? Decide for yourself what am I looking, what kind of growth do I need or want from the company? Do I want them to have me as a separate DevOps engineer? Do I want them to give me developer and DevOps engineer tasks? Like you have to decide this kind of stuff yourself. And then I think it also comes across really professionally for the companies when you go to the interview or when you apply for them and you say, I'm not just looking for anything. These are actually my criteria. So I also have my own requirements and my criteria of what kind of project I'm looking for. So do you fulfill those? Is that kind of job that you are offering? Because then company knows, okay, you actually have thought about this. You have put some thought and effort in it, and you kind of know what you want to get out of this and how to develop your career. So that could be something that's going to help in the job search as well.
Thanks for sharing, Nana. And speaking of, jobs, someone who just like they followed it and they got their first role, right? So what can we expect? Like, what can one expect as a first job? Obviously, it depends on the like the company, the project as such. But a high level overview of, let's say, junior DevOps engineer and senior DevOps engineers. How do these two differentiate?
Yeah, so first of all, expect that every company will be different and every project will be different, right? There are companies who have completely different idea of what DevOps engineer even does, right? So they kind of try to put everything on developer and they say, okay, now you are a DevOps engineer now. Expect that the projects will be different. So there's no like one standard way of having like a specific role and set of tasks. Another thing is also different between companies. Do they have like a very smooth and like kind of structured way of onboarding a new engineer, or do they just throw you in the team and kind of figure out what are you going to do, right? Or maybe you have a dedicated mentor in the team, like some senior engineer who is going to help you kind of onboard and kind of get to know the tools and stuff, or you kind of have to take initiative and ask them for feedback and for tasks and stuff. But I think the most important thing in any case, whether like whatever type of project you end up in, the most important thing is to take initiative. So you have to show them you are willing to learn. So they kind of give you more tasks, they give you more feedback, and try to like. Usually, they also give you some time to get familiarized with the code and different tools that you use and workflows and stuff. But try to ask questions, right? Because you are obviously the newcomer there, so you need to get all the information. And one thing that I think also kind of will make it easier for you and make it less frustrating when you join a new project is try to understand their processes in general. Like forget about the where the code is and looking at the code and the details. Try to understand the processes. Like What Git workflow are they using? How the developers work, right? Is the communication workflow, not just online but also offline processes, right? What deployment environment are they using? How often are they releasing, right? Do they have automated the whole process or part of the process? What part have they automated? So try to understand the processes, then try to understand what tools they're using. Are they using infrastructure as code tool? For what are they using it? And then once you have that figured out, then ask, okay, where's the code? Can I see, let's say they use Terraform, whatever, can I see the Terraform code? And then you can again ask, do you have a CI/CD pipeline for the infrastructure as code changes, right? Where is it deploying to? What is it doing? And then kind of get familiarized with the code. And very important, take initiative, ask questions, and try to get started with the first actual task as soon as possible instead of reading like hundreds of pages of documentation, which can be super boring.
Couldn't agree more. And since you're talking about getting your first job, can you maybe also share a little bit more like your tips around how to progress in this field?
Yeah, you mentioned it a couple of times. Continuous learning is absolutely necessary. Like you can't avoid it because you're not gonna, especially in DevOps, you're not gonna progress if you're not willing to learn new stuff all the time. So you have to maybe decide that also for yourself whether you want to go into DevOps, because that's gonna be like one of the main requirements. And the main reason for that is also because DevOps is still pretty new and it's very dynamic. So there are lots of tools that are being developed and companies obviously have to assess them, right? So maybe they use a tool and then it changes and they want to use another one. So you have to be like constantly up to date. Compared to, I don't know, maybe as a software developer, you can actually go and say, I'm going to specialize on JavaScript now, and that's what I'm going to do. And you can learn and deepen your knowledge about JavaScript, and you can stick to it. And you can say, I don't care about any other stuff. I'm a JavaScript developer. In DevOps, you can't really say that, right? You have to know, as I said, you have to know at least a couple of technologies, even as a junior DevOps engineer, to even get started. So learning, continuously exploring new stuff, new concepts, technologies is super important.
Yeah, really important to have an open mind in order to progress in the field. So one last question, based on your experiences, because you teach hundreds and thousands of folks. Um, are there any like mistakes to avoid, sort of a thing you'd like to mention when someone is starting on their journey for DevOps?
Yeah, so the most um, interesting and important mistake probably would be, there are a lot of people who kind of have this fear of kind of jumping into the technology and testing it out, and they kind of end up reading documentation and blog articles and kind of trying to get like all the features. So I think getting started as soon as possible, hands-on with the technology, is very important. So don't try to waste your time like reading just documentation and theoretic stuff. What else? Again, I think that's something that slows down your progress as an engineer and kind of makes the journey longer to from junior to senior. Is let's say you get into a project and you get assigned some tasks and you learn those tasks, right? And then you decide, you know what, this is cool. I'm getting faster at it, so I'm gonna do more of these tasks, right? So if you just start doing the same stuff, you're not gonna learn much, right? And I know that it feels comfortable because you have this success feeling, you are getting your tasks done, the team is relying on you, whatever, but it doesn't give you a chance to learn new things and develop, right? So you have to think about kind of pushing your comfort zone, yeah, like very often, and say, you know what, I already know how to do this kind of stuff, but I don't know how to do this task. So I'm going to take this one to challenge myself a little bit and learn new skills, maybe learn a new tool. So kind of try to go out of your comfort zone and not stay there just because you now know how to work with one tool maybe and do the tasks. Try to test out and try out new stuff as well.
This is I love that point, and this is also why there is a silver lining to feeling the imposter syndrome as a student, because if you find yourself in a place where you don't know much about something, it's a great opportunity as a student. I'm saying that you
Yeah,
can learn, contribute, because as a new grad, and like, people expect you not to be an expert, like if you're in your
yeah.
just in like college or whatever, but it's a great opportunity to learn and contribute.
For example, I get very often from people that are like, you are young and you don't have like, you probably don't have like that much experience in years. So how come you have all this knowledge, and how come you have this experience that you can teach other people? And like that is actually a logical question, because there are a lot of people with probably the same experience, like in terms of years, as me, who know maybe like way less, right? Or they have decided they're gonna stick to one technology, one programming language, whatever, and kind of get comfortable in that, right? So I think the main difference here is that there, and which is absolutely fine. Like if that's what's works for you, you can do that. You can specialize in one technology and say that's my comfort zone, and I'm not gonna leave this. I'm gonna do this for 20 years, right? But for me, it was exactly the opposite. Like in every job, in every company, I was always looking for what is the most difficult thing that none of the developers in the team want to do. And then I would actually take those tasks and I would do them, because I knew, okay, nobody's going to expect me to do any crazy stuff because I'm like a junior developer. So I'm going to try to do that and get efficient in that. So I'm the only one in the team who actually knows how to do this stuff, right? And this actually happened to be mostly the DevOps stuff, because the developers didn't want to do that. So that was my opportunity. And then I did that in every single project, every single time that this kind of opportunity would come up. And that was actually the main point where I was learning and progressing so fast compared to other people who had like the same experience in terms of years, right? So you can directly compare that. Like if you're doing the same stuff for 5 years, you're gonna have very limited knowledge. If you're doing new stuff every week, every month for 5 years, you're gonna have completely different portfolio of knowledge.
Couldn't agree more. Always look for challenges and to expand your skill set. um, thanks for joining, Nana. Really appreciate you giving the time. And you want to get in touch with Nana, you can check out the links in the description below, the YouTube channel and Twitter and everything I'll list down below. And yeah, do check out the channel. Definitely done a lot of new things. Really appreciate you giving the time, and thanks everyone for joining as well. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Have a great day. Bye.